days. But it also comes with the CDC under pressure to shorten isolation times from both the public and private sectors, which warn of widespread staffing issues if workers have to stay home. One doctor says letting those in isolation return to regular activities without testing is reckless. Sagar Magani, Washington.
President Biden calls him a giant of our history. Former Senator Harry Reid, a Nevada Democrat, a combative former boxer turned lawyer turned senator, widely acknowledged as one of the toughest deal makers in Congress. Harry Reid battled pancreatic cancer and died at his home in Nevada yesterday. He was 82. And John Madden, known for NFL football, broadcasting, and video games, has died. He was 85. The AP's Oscar Wells Gabriel has this.
Depending on how old you are, John Madden will be remembered as a legendary coach, enthusiastic broadcaster, author, or the man who gave his name to one of the most popular video games in history. The league has confirmed Madden's death, saying it came unexpectedly. He was 85 years old. Madden had a 10-year stint as head coach of the Oakland Raiders. After retiring at the tender age of 42, he did things that made him a household name well beyond coaching.
Like broadcasting and video games. This is AP News. A federal judge is not dismissing an indictment charging 4 alleged members of the Proud Boys in connection with the Capitol riot. The AP's Ed Donahue reports.
The 4 men claim their conduct is protected by the First Amendment right to free speech. But federal Judge Timothy Kelly countered they are not charged with anything nonviolent, like burning flags, wearing black armbands, or taking part in a mere sit-in or protest. The 4 men remain in jail with the trial set for May. The indictment claims on January 6th, several Proud Boys followed a crowd of people who breached barriers at the pedestrian entrance to the Capitol grounds and got in after the mob smashed windows and forced open doors. One Proud Boy member, Matthew Green, pleaded guilty and has agreed to cooperate with authorities. Ed Donahue, Washington.
A company's agreed to pay a tenant in New Hampshire $35,000 after she was denied permission to keep an emotional support dog, say prosecutors. I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now your WCPT 820 Chicago traffic update.
Still dealing with some issues on the inbound Eisenhower at North Avenue. You have a crash with a car versus wall in that area. Also inbound at Kedzie, there's a report of a crash as well. Inbound Stevenson, still pretty heavy on that ramp as you go from the inbound Stevenson to the inbound Dan Ryan. The outbound Stevenson at LaGrange, there was an earlier car fire that's been cleared. Still seeing delays back to the Des Plaines River Bridge, and also outbound on the Stevenson. The ramp from Route 83 heading southbound, there's a crash on that entrance ramp to the outbound Stevenson. The Dan Ryan inbound slows from Roosevelt to the Byrne interchange, and also on the Dan Ryan express lanes near 59th heading inbound. That earlier crash has now been cleared. That's traffic. I'm Paul Bodenloss.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
This is a WCPT Veteran Minute. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, men of all races across the country volunteered to join the fight, despite the United States Army being heavily segregated. Black enlistees were mostly assigned to combat support roles. But this did not stop Lieutenant Colonel Paul L. Bates, who knew of the racism and pushed his soldiers to achieve excellence. The 761st Tank Battalion was formed in the spring of 1942. It contained 30 black officers, 6 white officers, and 676 enlisted men. The unit donned the nickname the Black Panthers, wearing patches on their uniforms with a panther on it and the slogan, "Come Out Fighting." And in 1944, the 761st was assigned to General George Patton's Third Army in France. General Patton gave a colorful speech to his crew, and the Black Panthers became the first African-American tank squad in World War II. And by the end of the war, the Black Panthers had fought further east than every other United States unit, receiving 391 decorations for their heroism.
WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, good morning. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. What's going on, y'all? It's day 3 here live on WCPT 820 AM, where the facts actually do matter. We are the largest progressive talk radio station in the entire world. And for those of you who have been taking a little bit of a hiatus or a break for the last couple of days, my name is Brandon Johnson, filling in for Santita Jackson. Been doing it all week, and let me tell you, I've been having a blast doing it. I really have. But by day 3, waking up this time of day, it's refreshing. In fact, I'm surprised that more people don't just wake up early. Whether you host a radio program or not, just be up early. And so thank you all for doing that with me for the last couple of days. Today's conversation, I promise you, you're not going to regret tuning in today. Have a dynamic lineup. Some folks are going to be calling in today, giving us their perspective on a variety of issues. Everything that we have covered over the last couple of days, we're going to try to break some things down a little bit more, excuse me, just so that you all are not just simply stuck with my paradigm or just sort of my view of the world. You get a chance to hear from folks who are professionals or experts in their particular discipline. And so I'm going to give you those names in just a second, but before I do, I want to make sure that people understand that we are on social media. You should know that. I mean, who's not on social media now? Well, maybe a couple of people aren't. Like my dad, not on social media. He's actually bothered by the phone that he has now. The phone that allows him to FaceTime, his seed and his grandchildren. It bothers him. Anybody else have a father out there or a mother? Probably not so much mothers, but definitely dads who they just get stuck. Like the flip phone is like him having like a pocket chain. It's his equivalent. I mean, it's like he holds it and it possesses it with so much honor and pride. It's garbage. I'm sorry to offend all the grandpas out there that have flip phones, but go FaceTime y'all so that you can actually catch up with your family. They actually like you. They want to see you. So besides my father, who's not on social media, the rest of you, or the entire rest of the world, go to our Facebook page now. In fact, go there. You can like it. There's interesting articles that people post there. I'm there now. You can see me live. I'm fully dressed. I'm in my right mind today for the most part. And when we get into the deeper part of our conversations today, you can actually weigh in. You can just send messages. Tell us how you really feel about something. 773-763-9278. Really grateful. Didn't get a chance to thank our producer on Monday. Just got a little bit out of whack a little bit and a little out of practice. Devin is back. So much so that he's decided to return again for a second day. It makes me feel pretty special. Has nothing to do with the fact that he's going to get paid to be here. He just wanted to be here with me. Who else wants to be here with me on this fine Wednesday morning? Anybody else concerned about the fact that, snow fell yesterday for the first time in like 8 years? I do feel like that there is somewhat of a potential movie that is like being developed. And sometimes I do feel like in my day-to-day that there are people who are watching my lived experience and they're saying, what is wrong with you? Get out. That's a movie reference. I'm just saying it's a very bizarre time. Look, if the people who don't believe in all of the programs, the legislation that we're pushing as progressives, if you don't believe in anything else that we believe in as progressives, could you please accept the fact that the planet is going through like a hot flash? It's like the planet is like turned into my mother-in-law. It's just, I'm sorry, Meemaw. That's pretty bogus. I have a real bad propensity to just offend people who have the potential to vote for me one day. Thank you. Shout out to all of those who live in the 1st District of Cook County. Happy to serve you as your Cook County Commissioner. But for real, like these hot flashes and these cold flashes and whatnot, I think it hasn't snowed. Devin, I think it hasn't snowed since like March of last year or something like that. I mean, in a real way, so I don't know. I mean, actually I do know that we have to do everything humanly possible not to destroy the one place that we know we can reside. Now, I know that there are some billionaires that are already exploring life in other galaxies. And I'm not going to get in the way of that. I'm not necessarily trying to get a ride there either. I believe that the place that has water and oxygen, we should be okay with that. Like, why are we? Anyhow, so the snow fell yesterday. For the most part, it seemed to work. I mean, it was very familiar. And in typical Chicago fashion, too, when the snow falls for the first time in a real way, like, we get confused, like, to where we live and where we've grown up. Like, people don't know what to do. Do you ever feel like when you're driving and the snow is falling that there are cars that are coming after you? Am I the only one that feels like? So as I get older, my wife is constantly challenging me that, like, your old black manness is really starting to accelerate. All I'm saying is, like, people are like chasing you down in the snow. It's like being on the playground in a public school in 1982. When there were no rules, when you can just go outside and play, and you can just the whole game of dodgeball. There was a game literally called Kill the Man. That was literally the name of the game, and if you had the ball, it gave permission to all the other classmates to just come and kill you. That's how we played growing up. I mean, it was tackle, and then of course King of the Mountain. I guess we probably say Queen of the Hill of the Mountain now. Get to the top of the very highest part of the pile. When the trucks would come through and clear out the parking lots. This is a really bad show right now, isn't it? Sorry, Santita. 773-763-9278. But climate change is absolutely real, and it's something that we have to continue to pay attention to. I know there are strong environmentalists here in the city of Chicago and Cook County that are really pushing the city of Chicago to do right by the residents of the southeast side of Chicago. There is a toxic plant, General Iron, that wants to move its location from the north side to the southeast side. The toxicity that permeates throughout the atmosphere has been well documented in terms of the damage that it has done to black and brown lives in particular. Someone who has grown up with asthma, I pay special close attention to just environmental matters because, at any moment when the weather shifts, changes, it can certainly trigger the health condition that I was born with. So it's something that we do take seriously, and whether you believe in climate change or not, the harsh reality is that there are conditions that that certainly exacerbate very, very harsh living conditions for people, and especially poor folks and people of color. We know that the smokehouse was dismantled in the middle of a pandemic in the Latinx community. A permit that was given and by the city of Chicago for this company to explode and blow up a stack house in the middle of a pandemic, and just the smog and the particles that are in the air. Like, we have to really take the environmental issues seriously. I remember reading a book a while ago during my undergrad, Jonathan Colzo. I know folks who listen to Progressive Talk Radio very familiar with that name, Jonathan Colzo. He takes these sort of sociological investigations, if you will, into communities of color, and particularly on the East Coast in New York, and just the type of build out around poor communities where, again, toxic waste is just the norm, and it shouldn't be. So we're paying close attention to that. Again, we have a very exciting show today that I'm looking forward to, and I'll get to you in a second to tell you who is going to be hanging out with us. Before I do, there's a few other things that I think are just worth reporting on in the news today. Obviously, for those of you who are sports fans, whether you're sports fans or not, of course, Coach Madden, 85 years old, I believe he was, passed away on Tuesday. And then we just got the news, if you saw the news this morning, one of the former leaders of the Democratic Party, Harry Reid, former Democratic Senate Majority Leader, 82 years old, has passed away. So we are thinking about their families, their loved ones who had to share their father, their husband, their grandfather, their brother, their son, their uncle. They shared their friend. They shared that person with the rest of us, and that's not easy. And by no means, do I like to compare myself to any of those two characters, but all of you who have families, and you make a sacrifice every single day for your purpose, your God-given purpose, and what you are driven and to do. And sometimes we get taken away from our families at times when the rest of the world is looking for our leadership. And whether you are a classroom teacher, whether you're working in a grocery store, the sacrifices that you all make every single day, just for whatever it's worth, I thank you. I don't take it for granted. I try not to take it lightly. The individuals that serve us every day. When I'm on the train, I haven't rode the bus in a while, but I have been on the L, and just knowing that there are folks there that are around who get up every single day to put in, that 8-hour shift or that 12-hour shift, and hoping that what you get at the end of that week, the ends do meet. So thank you. And again, we are appreciative of the lives of those two gentlemen who were certainly, made their mark in society. So a few other things that are going on. Here's something that's interesting. Well, but maybe it should not be. Well, I guess it is interesting to me, to be honest with you. So there was a poll that was taken. So January 6th, which, the anniversary of that date is coming up soon, when you literally had a group of Americans who were actively engaged in the destruction of the country. They were, some of the reports that are coming out of what these folks were trying to accomplish on that day, as bizarre as it might seem to many of us, that they actually had some sort of mission or plan. I won't get into their ability to even get that far and execute a portion of that plan and the lives that were lost on that day. But they took a poll of Republicans. They found that 30% of people who support the GOP, only 30% believe that those characters involved in the January 6th attempt, whatever that attempt was, only 30%, actually 29% believe that they should be charged. 29%. And so I guess the other 70%, want them to go to restorative justice or some sort of restorative circle. I don't know. But what it does highlight, though, is it's not just the vast difference between how those of us, whether you are a Democrat, a moderate, or a conservative Democrat, or those who pull stronger and further to the left, or progressive Democrats, to see our country's capital, to see a group of people who were just dead set on whatever it was that they were trying to accomplish, to know that there are a sizable number of individuals who vote Republican, did not see any harm in that act. That's disturbing. It is. It's disturbing primarily because what type of act could they have done that would have convinced more GOP supporters to say, okay, yeah, when you're threatening to shoot and murder members of Congress, and you're walking away with podiums and vandalizing and harassing and chasing, all of that what we saw on that day, what would it take for folks to say, well, yeah, that's we should move forward with justice? And the reason why I'm raising that is because folks who listen to my Sunday morning program, and I encourage you to do that every single Sunday morning from 9 to 10, Sunday mornings with Brandon Johnson. I'm not one to I believe that our penal system is morally corrupt, and it has been historically a tool of violence executed against black folks in particular. Black and brown folks, poor people, have been harmed by this carceral state, this addiction that we have of not just spending dollars towards incarceration and policing, but the overwhelming evidence that tells us that the system has been designed and set up to control, or at least an attempt to control, black communities, black folks, right? I mean, this is obviously well documented. This is not me making it up, but this is, you know, the slave patrols and, you know, eventually that becoming the police department, right? I mean, this is, there was always a concern that, you know, the presence of black folks was always seen as a threat to white supremacy. And so when I think about, you know, this act on January 6th, and folks within the Republican Party don't even see like the recognition of just them being charged. We're not even saying that they'll necessarily be found guilty, but just the act and the behavior alone is worthy of a charge. That's disturbing and troubling. And again, especially because there is a real systemic problem that we have within our penal system that targets black folks. I've been reading, some of you know, I've been reading over the course of this last year. I've been reading Locking Up Our Own, and there was a section in the book, it's worthwhile reading too. I'm actually kind of going through it for the second time. There's an entire section there in the book, I think around chapter 3 or something like that, where it just lays out how police forces, particularly in the South, and this was the issue in the North as well, but police forces overwhelmingly made up of white men. And the idea of a black man being a law enforcer, the prevailing paradigm or thought, you know, just barely a generation ago, it was unheard of, unfathomable to think that a black man could actually enforce law. And so we'll get into that discussion, you know, perhaps in another day, but just, you know, looking into just the psyche of what policing, on a more deeper level, get into a conversation about policing and particularly, you know, diversifying the police force and whether or not that's something that would create more of a balance approach, not just in terms of how law is enforced, but how investigations are done and whether or not communities are safer when they are policed by black communities are safer when they're policed by black folks. And so there's a really interesting presentation there that Martin Luther King Sr. Has a very, very, you know, probably just a very standard perspective for that time that I think is instructive for our conversation today. But be that as it may, just some of the things that are going on in the headline news. One more of the thing that I just think is worth discussing. This one is interesting to me. It's actually probably the most interesting thing. We all know that this Omicron variant, it's quite contagious, right? So, well, the New York Times reported that it's not more severe for children, apparently, despite there's a rise in hospitalization or hospitalizations. So it's interesting just because, look, we're all taking, I hope that we're taking extra precaution. You know, getting vaccinated, getting the booster, remaining, you know, 6 feet or more. But it's disturbing to me as much as it is interesting because, like, the guidelines just continue to shift and change. Like every day, every hour, it's like a walking contradiction. The CDC will send out documentation of what's happening and the projection and, you know, what we can even anticipate, but yet the recommendations that are coming from the CDC are leaving people quite perplexed. And so I am going to try to break that down a little bit more today, at least attempt to, with some of our guests. And so today, I'm looking forward to, I had a very special guest that's going to join us in a couple of minutes at 6:30. Just a young voice, a leader in the city of Chicago. Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor really challenged us yesterday about hearing from youth voices. And so Catlin Savato, student in Chicago Public Schools, is going to talk to us and give us her perspective And I think it's worthwhile hearing. I mean, she's got quite the thought and perspective around learning in our public schools and how we approach public safety and just how we approach the needs of students and young people in this moment, particularly as I've already stated, that there are some growing concerns that we have within our society, and how do we make sure that those voices that will live through these experiences have real standing in decision making. So you're going to hear from her. Also, in the 7 o'clock hour, y'all, we have the Cook County Board President Tony Perkwick, who's going to join us. So looking forward to that conversation. And then right after her, 7:30, the Cook County Public Defender, Sharon Mitchell, we're going to hear from him. So, hey, just to give you just a little bit of a taste of what you're going to hear from Ms. Salvato, here's her testimony that she gave about a year ago to the Board of Education, just to give you a little bit of perspective of what you can anticipate. It's WCPT 820 AM. It's the Santita Jackson Show. My name is Brandon Johnson.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council. My name is Caitlin Salvato. I'm a 13-year-old activist and organizer. In this city, we have built an establishment where the black and brown communities become poorer and poorer, and the white communities are given more resources and live in a greater prosperity. This budget is regressive, and it hurts the citizens of this city. The institution of our racist law enforcement has continued to act as a predator towards our black and brown communities. Our school children are given less resources. Moms and dads aren't being paid livable wages, and along with that comes the struggle for ensured affordable housing and health care. And an even larger problem is our environment. But these things are things that you should know. Today, I'm advocating for the folks in our communities, our black and brown communities, in fact. But it's funny, though, because that is your job, to advocate and lead our communities. But instead, you are pushing for a racist, classist, ableist, pro-capitalist budget. Because, big shocker, we have decided to put money and property over human life once again. And I'm starting to believe that is something that some of us enjoy doing in this call. But you know what? I actually know why we are actually pushing for this budget, because it makes white people comfortable. You can say that investing into aspects that actually benefit the citizens of the city costs too much money. But you didn't say that when you decided to overly and obsessively fund the CPD, which is a predator. You didn't say that when you decided to send our kids to school with less resources and teachers who are being underpaid. Talking to this body is like talking to a brick wall, because year after year you watch as our black and brown communities die. Inglewood, Chatham, Grand Crossing, while Beverly, Mount Greenwood, Lincoln Park continue to thrive. Why? Because those are white neighborhoods. The segregation of this city cannot be hidden. The systemic racism that kills our black and brown communities will not be hidden. Last week, I joined this conference call, and I asked you all to invest into our children, our communities, our mental health. And what did you do? You turned around and you pushed for this incompetent budget. It urges me that I will watch as my brothers and sisters will grow up in conditions where they're as smart as their white counterparts, but they receive less opportunities because of the segregation and racist institutions. Now, I question how I, a 13-year-old black girl, has come to this realization, but you, adults, grown folks who pay bills and taxes, haven't even dared to open your eyes.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT Willow Springs is powered by ComEd. Lower your energy bills and reduce your carbon footprint with the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program.
Yes, Ms. Tubbs. No problem. I'll call someone about the plumbing.
One of Beatrice's properties needs a new superintendent.
The custodial team is not...
Someone with handyman superpowers and a concierge alter ego.
Does anyone know any good electricians near Parkville?
Indeed can help her hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Instant Match instantly connects you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. Don't miss our New Year's special. Save up to $1,000 on Sleep Number 360 Smart Beds, plus special financing. Ends Monday. Special financing subject to credit approval. Minimum monthly payments required. See store for details.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Here's the latest Chicago traffic update.
Go with a few problems this morning. Starting on the inbound Ike near North Avenue, there's a crash taking out the left lane. There's also some delays between Costner and Pulaski because of a stall. It's taking out the left lane as well. And inbound at Keeler, there's a report of a crash also. On the inbound Stevenson, as you approach the Dan Ryan, there's that ramp from the inbound Stevenson to the inbound Dan Ryan hitting the brakes, and the Dan Ryan heading inbound. Little sluggish this morning as you go from 18th into the Byrne interchange. Also this morning on the south side near Bridgeport's 26th Street remains closed between Union and Canal. That's closed due to a structure fire. That's traffic. I'm Paul Bodenloss.
Mind Over Matters.
Dr. Amy Harris. Duan, as you know, this show is about challenging you to think differently, to make different choices in your life, to take action, to create positive outcomes in your life. So I want to challenge you to look at your life holistically. Where am I satisfied? What areas need attention? And then go to work, take in action what you need to do.
Mind Over Matters with Dr. Amy Harris Nuan. Sundays at 10 a.m. on WCPT 820.
Susan, I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic is terrible.
It sure is. But on top of that, gas prices have been skyrocketing. I can't believe how expensive gas has gotten recently.
Prices at the pump are up, but I never pay full price for gas anymore. I just use the free Get Upside Gas app that pays you cash back for every gallon of gas you buy.
Wait a minute. Are you saying you actually get paid cash when you buy gas with the Get Upside app?
Yes, up to 25 cents a gallon cash back every time I buy gas.
And does that actually add up to anything?
Some months I make $200 to $300.
Wow, that's serious extra cash. I'm downloading the free Get Upside app now.
Download the free Get Upside app now in the App Store or Google Play to save up to 25 cents a gallon when you buy gas. Use promo code TOUR for a 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's up to 50 cents a gallon on your first fill-up. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUR for up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUR.
Who doesn't love pets? This is Joan Esposito, and here at WCPT, we really, really love pets. So much so that we're spotlighting an adoptable, adorable dog or cat every month. Our friends from local rescue agencies will be featuring a furry celebrity on the WCPT820.com homepage. And we'll talk live with them and Dr. Craig from Mark Drugs about why rescue is best. It's all part of Live, Local, and Progressive with Joan Esposito. Log on to WCPT820.com to learn more.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Sorry to disappoint you. For those of you who have been on break for a couple of days, it's not Santita Jackson. I don't want you to be concerned. Like, is she doing okay? Sound like she got something in her throat. No, it's Brandon Johnson filling in for Santita Jackson. Been doing it all week. It's day 3. It's early, y'all. And we couldn't do this without you all. I want to thank you all personally for hanging in there with us. And, of course, I want to thank my dear sister Santita for all the work that she does. She's been just an incredible support to me over the last, 10, 12 years since we met. And it's really great to be able to work alongside of her and, of course, appreciate the perspective that she brings and the quality of guests that she offers up. And I want to do my best to try to at least keep that standard to the best of my ability. And I believe we do have really a rising, thoughtful voice in the city of Chicago. And had a chance, you listened to her just a couple of moments ago. She gave this incredible presentation speech, the budget a year ago. Not this year's budget, but the budget before, with a very strong critique of how we spend and prioritize our dollars in the city of Chicago. And oftentimes you'll hear older voices, constantly, critique youth, challenging them to get involved and to become active. And this young person has done that. And I'm happy to be joined on the Santita Jackson Show by this young voice, Caitlin Savato. Hey, Caitlin, good morning. Thanks for getting up so early. How you doing, sister?
Hello, good morning.
I appreciate it. I know you normally get up this time of morning every day, so I trust that you are you've probably been up for a couple of hours. The rumor has it, though, Caitlin, is that you have superpowers. So the folks who refer to you speak very highly of you. And so for our audience who may not be familiar with you, could you just take a couple of moments just to offer up a little bit of background about yourself, how old you are, what school you go to, and just, your life ambition?
Yeah. I'm 14. I'm a freshman in high school. I go to Percy Julian High School. I mean, I feel like a normal 14-year-old. I do regular 14-year-old stuff. I've been organizing for a couple of years. I started off doing climate stuff, but then I wanted to get into stuff that was more impactful to community and intercommunal, and just building intercommunal relationships. And that budget speech was actually like me kind of surfacing and getting into that a little bit. And just really like, I feel like I've had like a really rude awakening on like the things going on in my city, but also just like the complexity of it, right? Because it's not always just this black and white picture. It's just really complex, and it gets into so many different levels of how depth it is. And I feel like it all starts with just us as individual humans. But yeah.
Yeah. When you say you're a normal 14-year-old, you really have me convicted, because my oldest son just turned 14, and he's definitely abnormal just based upon the first 30 seconds of this conversation. So I might need some advice from you how to help my 14-year-old son. He put on his headset, Caitlin, as soon as he turned 14, and closed his door, and I haven't seen him for months now. So hopefully I get a chance to catch up with him on social media. But you mentioned the complexity of all of these issues. One of the things that has been quite perplexing is how government in particular has behaved during this pandemic. And before you jumped on, the mixed messages that continue to come from the CDC, the Chicago Public Schools, the governors, mayors, county board presidents, I mean, you name it, it's clearly all over the place. But one of the things, before we get into that, I am curious. There's been a lot of debate, Caitlin, about like how students are absorbing this moment, and particularly learning. So there's been folks are saying that students are experiencing learning loss. We got to get them back in schools, because if they're not back in schools, the entire economy is going to collapse, because not a single child in the black community is going to be able to read. Can you offer some perspective about like just learning during the pandemic, and then even this notion of so-called learning loss by having to work remote, essentially to keep people alive?
Yeah. I wouldn't even call it learning during a pandemic, right? I think the whole experience, just constant crisis after crisis, is just showing how the infrastructure in which our city and our schools stand on, right, is leaking. And I think that the way that we are going about these things, and even like labeling the crises, learning loss, right, that's just another way of us putting duct tape on the pipes that are leaking within our infrastructure. And so I think it's a lot easier for adults and folks who, number one, right, the folks who are saying, learning loss aren't within community with the people who are going to school or sitting in front of these computers, right, or teaching the classes, or being in community with us young people. And so for you to say, or for one to say, one has lost learning throughout the pandemic, or, we need to go back to school because of this. Man, I've been sitting in a classroom for the past, 4 months. I haven't learned anything efficiently since, the 7th grade. I haven't taken knowledge and been like, I want to do something useful with this since 7th grade. And so even being in the classroom, right, my needs aren't met. And even being within it, I feel like there's this constant reinforcement of establishment and institutions, right? And so what I mean by that is that it's not, you're learning, or this is your education, or this is knowledge, right? And use that to your full extent. It's practically 20, 30 kids sitting in one classroom, and someone having something up on a board, and us expecting to memorize, write that down, right? Which is all part of capitalistic and white supremacist models of what schools and classrooms now look like. And so when we expect for children specifically, right, because that's what we are, that's what we all are, that's what I am, when we expect children to be able to adapt and cope so easily with so many different changes and so many different things going on, it's so inhumane, right? And so I think for me, that's been my hardest part. I walk around school all the time thinking, I'm not supposed to be here right now, right? our city's in a crisis. Folks have trauma that has not been tended to. And so I think instead of us tending to folks' needs, or instead of us tending to trauma, it's so easy to slap that label on it. And at the same time that we did send kids back to school, right, is the same reason why the CDC just said, oh, you don't have to quarantine for 10 days anymore. You can quarantine for 5. You get the kids back in school and you get the parents working, and then there goes the economy going back and forth and people making their money, right? And so that's exactly what that model looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, thank you for that perspective. I think outlining the fact that this is driven by capitalism, and I think that is, if we're clear about that, it could actually inform and instruct, how we respond or even resist it. But I don't know if there's a whole bunch of resistance at this point, Caitlin. I mean, I do appreciate you elevating your voice here, but something you said I think is actually critical here, is the needs of students and services that students should have, especially because of the crises that we constantly live through, the type of trauma that we experience in a personal way. If you can offer up just what is trauma, right? And I'm asking that question. And look, I mean, shout out to all of those alum of Percy Julian. I'm sure you're making a whole bunch of people proud, representing the South Side. But I've shared this with my siblings quite a bit. I don't believe we necessarily grew up poor, Caitlin, but we were low income. And so the way I describe it is that we ate every day. We just didn't really like what we ate. But I do remember like some very difficult times in our home, and not to put all my business out there, but there were times when water was shut off. There was time when the electricity wasn't working. I mean, there were some tough times that we had and experienced over my childhood, and I didn't look at it as trauma. I just looked at it as a bad day. So the reason I'm asking like what's trauma is I think that there has been this normalization that we've experienced over time, and I don't know if we have. I believe that there's a clear definition of trauma, but I don't want to assume that everybody does. And so from a 14-year-old perspective, can we just start with that before we get into the services and needs? What's trauma?
Trauma looks like to me, I think trauma has a multitude of, it just depends on the individual human being, right? And so it's not to say, oh, this is trauma or this isn't. And I feel like at the same time that, and which is exactly why you're asking this question, but we're not taught to acknowledge our complexity as human beings. And so when we do have trauma, which can just be experiences that have caused reactions within our brain, we're not taught to acknowledge that. And so we ourselves aren't taught to acknowledge, oh, this is what's happening, this is the cause, and this is how my body's reacting. We're not taught to do that ourselves as one human, right? And so we're expected to be in these social settings with, 30 different humans sitting in one classroom, right? And everyone's having their own reactions, but that's just seen, and I think this is one of those capitalistic just things that's upheld, is that that's just seen as, oh, you're misbehaving, or oh, you're doing something wrong. And that's what happens a lot of times with specifically Black and brown kids, right? And so I think trauma, however you feel it is to you, or however your experience is, that could be your trauma. But I think that trauma specifically can be collectively, it can be individually, but I think a lot of trauma, without us having acknowledgement of it, or without us knowing of it, is rooted within infrastructures that we stand on and institutions that we enable all the time.
And unfortunately, these institutions, don't necessarily feel the urgency to address what is clear to most folks, that there's a manifestation of tremendous harm. I know the Chicago Teachers Union fought hard to increase the number of social workers and counselors in their last contract fight, but you're in the school, right? And what help our listeners understand, whether it's at Percy Julian or schools where you might have other individuals that you rock with, maybe their experiences, what's needed versus what's available. So when we talk about trauma, when we talk about the type of learning that we need to experience and see in order to be productive, or more importantly, to be purposeful in our existence, what's needed from your perspective as a freshman in high school versus what's actually available? Because there's obviously a mismatch. Clearly, you know that I believe and know that there's a mismatch, but I would rather, gather your perspective.
Yeah, I think a lot of different things are needed, and it can go from things that we've been fighting for, right? Like CTU's been fighting for nurses and social workers in our schools for so long, and it can also go from just having that like one-on-one time. I feel like we really need a basis or just like a system of care within our schools. I think we need community. I think we need that those one-on-one relationships, because that is what helps us, right, resist the certain things that this institution is like just pulling out, right, and keeps like forcing onto us. And so when we do have community within our schools, and that could be so complex. And so what I mean by that is that just caring for one another, and just like being there, and also acknowledgement that we are there for each other, right? And I don't think that's what our school settings look like right now. Or I don't know, because I would say mine doesn't look like that right now, right? And it's just there's just a lot of things that are being upheld that feel like they're getting in the way of all of those things, like caring and having those relationships and building community with folks, or implementing systems of care. And what systems of care could look like, right, are just alternatives to the processes and things that we've been doing, right? I mean, this is a thing that's happening at a lot of schools, right? Kids are getting into fights, like fighting every single day. Morgan Park, which is right down the street from my school, around the same street, has fights like every single day. And then folks walk around like just like wondering, well, what are we going to do with these kids, right? Like, kids are fighting, what do we do? Well, maybe like you sent kids back to school during the middle of a pandemic and didn't give them any services, didn't say, I mean, not even that, right? The mental health services that were deemed as at the beginning of the year was 1 week of doing social emotional learning bell ringers for 8 class periods every single day for the first week of school. Like, that's not tending to someone's needs, right? That's capitalism, and that's just us being forced to show our labor, right? And so I think that when it comes to these specific things and our specific needs, whether it's fights, whether it's kids are hungry, whether it's not having those relationships, or how should we go about decision making, right? All of these things are the way that we have actively been depriving our communities from, not just on a school level, right, but on a city-based level. And so the way that we go about these things, we ignore it. Again, that's that leaky infrastructure. Those are those pipes that are leaking, but we just put duct tape on them instead of actually fixing them. And a lot of that, too, is just trauma that we're not tending to. And so I think that is what it looks like. So those are the things that we should have. I can't even tell you about the services that we already have, because I haven't seen them. They haven't been put in front of my face. But I would like to see what services we have. But honestly, I mean, at the beginning of my year, I was telling my vice principal, I was like, yo, like, folks have trauma that's not being tended to, and I think we should start like a peer support group. And basically just shut my idea down and was like, oh, well, our whole first floor is a restorative justice space. And I was like, really? Because I hadn't heard of it. Like, if we do have the space, why aren't we using it? If we do have the money, why aren't we using it, right? If we do have these resources, why aren't we using them for the things that students need? And at the same time, why are we not asking students or telling students, hey, this is here for you, or I'm here for you, I care for you, right? That's not being told to students. And so that's where that dehumanization goes very deeply, right? And a lot of times it feels like, because we do go to these institutions, that they aren't here for us. And so how are we supposed to feel walking around the school for 7 hours a day, not feeling cared for, right, but carrying so many burdens and so much trauma?
Yeah, that's a statement that's worth tweeting. Creating a system of care, as well as, how do you expect students, to walk and exist in an environment where that is not necessarily the experience or felt. by our students. One of the things that you did say, which I just want to offer this up for our audience, when we talk about resources and dollars, at least for pandemic spending, we know that the city of Chicago has received upwards of $2 billion just for the Chicago public schools alone. So when Caitlin, and for those of you just tuning in for the first time today, good morning. It is the Santita Jackson Show. My name is Brandon Johnson, filling in for Santita. I'm doing it all week. So whether you like it or not, I'm here. But more importantly, we have Caitlin Savato. She's a freshman at Percy Julian High School in the south side of Chicago. And we're just talking about just her perspective around not just this pandemic, but just her perspective of this society that we're asking young people to engage in and grow in. And the harsh reality is that there's a struggle for many of our students to actually experience a real growth because needs are not being met. And so there's billions of dollars literally available to meet these needs. But one of the things, though, Caitlin, besides the dollar point that you made, is that sometimes I feel like adults, when we hear from students, and I'll be honest, look, I taught in public schools. I'm primarily a middle school teacher, but I did teach a year high school. And I remember when I was teaching in middle school, I would have some days that were pretty upsetting, I'll be honest with you. And, students, that trauma was, in full effect. And so we're trying to make it work in the classroom with 32 children, teaching at Cabrini Green. And one time I had a real upsetting day. I won't go into all the details, but one of my students raised her hand and she wanted to tell me what the problem was. And, in that moment, I have to be honest with you, I was struck because, when you're in a heated moment and you believe you're doing your very best, and when a student that's 14 years old looks you in the face and say, well, look, here's what you should be doing. You get my point. And look, I'm not, trying to be like demeaning or dismissive to youth voices. What I'm saying is that I do wonder if, your assistant principal or other adults or even the mayor of Chicago, that their initial reaction is like, yo, we are doing something. But then your follow-up is saying, like, look, you might be doing something, but somehow we don't know what's happening. So my question, though, is to you, like, what, because I think that's important. Like, what could we do better as adults, elected officials? I had a couple come up to me the other week ago. We did a ribbon cutting, brand new affordable housing unit, multiple units for seniors. This older couple looked at me in the face and was like, Commissioner Johnson, thank you, but you ain't doing enough. I was like, dang, we just cut a ribbon. But they weren't wrong. But you know where I'm going, Caitlin, that sometimes that we get a defensive posture because we believe we are doing something, even if it's not enough. How do we communicate that? How do we absorb that as leaders from folks who are experiencing this stuff in a real way without it being like such a personal attack that somehow you are failing, even when we can admit that it's not enough? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think doing exactly what you just did, and just having that acknowledgement, right? I think acknowledgement just takes us a long way. And when we do choose to acknowledge, like, oh, maybe I'm not doing enough, or maybe we should be doing something different, I think it takes us a couple steps further than where we are right now, and that's just enough itself. But I think that from specific elected officials, right, I don't think that we're looking at that. I don't think we're looking at, I mean, of course we all want a better Chicago, we all want a better city, but what does that look like to folks, and how do we implement that? And I mean, my thing, and I definitely get that whole defensive thing, because when folks tell me I'm wrong, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not wrong, right? But I think a lot of times I come off the bat just saying, like, adults are super closed-minded. And so I think that a lot of adults are so it's just proof, right? Have been sitting throughout these systems of oppression for so long that they get so used to them. And so when young people and when young voices are like, yo, why are we doing this? Or, yo, this is not right, or this doesn't sit right? I think it kind of like opens up that eye of like, I have been sitting through the system of oppression, or I have been enabling this institution, and where do I go from this, or how should I go about this? Because we have to participate in things, right? I have to go to school every day, even though I don't want to, even though I know it's not in my best care. Folks have to go to work, and so I think that there's a lot of things that we have to do and that we have to participate in that we don't want to. And I think that as adults, because you have lived longer, you've been doing that for a very long time, but I think that young folks are just tired of doing that because we know that it's not for our best of care. We know that it's not for us. We know that it's for these systems that are making profit off of us, or gaining things from us or from our presence, right? And so I think, like I was saying about how specific elected officials aren't looking at it this way, or don't even want to take that step of acknowledgement, it makes it 10 times harder, right? I can tell you the amount of times I've gotten so frustrated of seeing something that Mayor Lori Lightfoot has done and been like, bro, what are you doing, right? Like how do you say these things? How do you just go about your day knowing that folks are dying, folks are in crisis after crisis, and you're not doing anything about it? And I get really angry that folks sit on all of this power and do nothing with it. And that's the other thing with adults too, right? Like, you guys sit on so much power, whether you're the mayor or not, you have power, right, as adults, because you have experience over us, or you have lived longer than us, right? And so you have this power, even when you do feel powerless, or even when you're not the most powerful, adults do have that kind of power that look over young people's lives. But when you have that specific power of like, yo, a whole city is going through this, or a whole city, like, we're having rising COVID cases, or teachers can't go to school because they're in quarantine, and now all of our classes are being quarantined, right? Or folks are dying because we don't invest into community. When you sit on that, I mean, sure, it would be hard to acknowledge, right? Like, dang, I've been doing this for the past, 2 years now that she's been in office, and we've got to try something new. But I don't think that that's where that's coming from when it comes to those folks in power. I think that it still comes from that infrastructure and not being able to confront what's actually happening. And so, like I was saying before, instead of us fixing those pipes, we throw labels and we throw duct tape on those pipes, expecting folks to just sit and be okay with it, right? It's the same reason why we keep investing into policing, and it's the same reason why folks still have conflict in schools, right? Like, we aren't addressing the root issues, and we aren't doing the things that we need to be doing. And I say we collectively because this is our city, right? This is not just Mayor Lori Lightfoot's city. This is not just whomever's city, right? This is my city. I live in the city. I participate in it. I grew up here. I was born here. This is our city. We all have to take care of this collectively, whether we like leadership or not. But when it comes to leadership not doing what it's supposed to be doing, or when it comes to us having to kind of like sit down and break down and say, okay, well, this obviously isn't working, right? Policing isn't working. Policing kids isn't working. Policing in general isn't working, right? Let's try something new. With that comes acknowledgement. And so when folks aren't being able to acknowledge, oh, I did this wrong, or oh, we should try something else, that makes it 10 times harder for any of us, right, to do what's right or to implement what's right.
That's Caitlin Savato, freshman at Percy Julian High School on the south side of Chicago. A very special surprise guest today. And Caitlin, I can't believe our 30 minutes, they're up. And I got to tell you, I wish we had more time, but I want to thank you to your parents and all those who love you and care for you for being willing to be vulnerable and transparent this morning and being willing to lead. Can I ask a favor of you? Can we have you back another time? I promise you we'll try to get to some of the things that you were just alluding to, especially around public safety. Can we figure that out, Caitlin?
Yes, definitely.
All right. I appreciate you. I know you got to go jogging or whatever else you do first thing in the morning. Listen, when we come back, we're going to have Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. We have Public Defender Cook County, Sharon Mitchell. It's the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820 AM. The phone lines are available to y'all. Good morning, y'all. Get up.
Velvety paper feel, exquisite colors, stunning scale. At Staples, we sweat the details and quality of every print project. Stop by Staples and try our Print Big Promise. We're committed to getting your print job right, to treating your small business like a big deal, and guiding you from start to finish. Get 20% off signs, banners, and posters when you spend $75 or more. Offer ends January 1st. Visit staples.com/services/printing for details. Staples, where small business prints big.
Looking for quality candidates this new year? Look no further than Indeed. Our new video interview tool takes the hassle out of virtual hiring. Visit Indeed.com/credit.
This is AP News. I'm Rita Foley. The number of COVID infections is rising. The U.S. saw a 34% increase in the number of cases last week. Meanwhile, the CDC's decision to shorten the recommended COVID isolation period from 10 days to 5 for those who have COVID but no symptoms is drawing fire from some medical experts. The AP's Julie Walker with the latest on this.
The new guidelines allow people without symptoms to leave isolation with a mask after 5 days, but without getting tested. There have been difficulties related to getting those tests, including long waits, raising questions about how the guidance was crafted and why it was changed. The CDC has been under pressure from the public and private sector, including the airline industry, to shorten the isolation time and reduce the risk of severe staffing shortages. Thousands of flights have been canceled over the past few days in a mess blamed on the Omicron variant surge. I'm Julie Walker.
In fact, stranded traveler Sassy Estes got stuck at the airport in Boston after her flight home to Ohio got canceled. So what do you do while you're stuck at the airport for hours?
I'm probably going to sleep because it makes the time go faster. So I'll just curl up here and sleep.
By the way, if you're traveling by car during this holiday season, gas prices are still falling. Gas is $3.28 a gallon today. A suspect is in jail after a hit-and-run crash in South Florida that killed 2 children and hospitalized 4 other children on Monday. The Broward County Sheriff's Office says Sean Charles Greer confessed to being involved. Greer is also on probation for burglary. China is wagging its finger at the U.S., saying satellites launched by Elon Musk's SpaceX nearly hit Beijing's space station and its 3-member crew. This is AP News. The nation is remembering 2 high-profile men who died yesterday, former Nevada Senator Harry Reid and John Madden, the Hall of Fame coach turned broadcaster. Here's Tom Merriam.
Hall of Famer John Madden, who became a football legend as a coach, broadcaster, and video game innovator, died Tuesday at the age of 85. Madden first came to prominence as the coach of the Oakland Raiders, where his teams advanced to 7 AFC title games, ultimately winning Super Bowl 11. His .759 winning percentage is the best among NFL coaches with more than 100 games. But Madden gained even more recognition when he moved into broadcasting, becoming the prime color commentator for CBS, Fox, ABC, and NBC. His Madden NFL football became one of the most popular video games ever. I'm Tom Merriam.
Harry Reid, a Democratic senator from Nevada, died yesterday at the age of 82. He was known for his behind-the-scenes wrangling to get things done in Congress. President Biden calls him a giant of our history. I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now your WCPT 820 Chicago traffic update.
On the CTA Brown Line, the Kimball-bound Brown Line trains are standing at Addison as they continue with some mechanical problems in that area. Also this morning, if you're on the inbound Eisenhower, slowing from First to Des Plaines, and it's heavy from Costner to Pulaski with a stall that takes out the left lane. The Stevenson heading inbound gets heavy as you approach the Dan Ryan with that ramp from the inbound Stevenson to the inbound Dan Ryan hitting the brakes. Once you're on the Dan Ryan heading inbound, that's sluggish from 18th into the Byrne interchange. Also, if you're on the roadways this morning, you do have some problems in the south side with 26th Street between Union and Canal closed. That's all due to a structure fire in that area. That's traffic. I'm Paul Bodenloss.
Need new hires in the new year? You need Indeed to help find your next hire. When you sponsor a post, you get a list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit.
Attention homeowners that have ever had a broken appliance. That's a joke, right? We've all had broken appliances. I own a home just like you and have found a way for as little as $1 a day to have all the major appliances in my home on a warranty plan. They're guaranteed to be fixed or replaced. You know how expensive an air conditioner, the heating system, a washing machine, dryer, water heater, or refrigerator can be. For about $1 a day, all your major appliances are protected in case they break. Unless you're Daddy Warbucks or the Monopoly guy and you don't care about money, call my friends at the Home Service Club now and get a warranty on your major appliances. It's a free call and the first month is free. But be one of the first 25 people to call within the next 10 minutes.
800-814-5615. 800-814-5615. 800-814-5615. Again, that's 800-814-5615.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter. Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Good morning to our WCPT 820 AM Progressive Talk Radio family. Those of you who are listening throughout the city of Chicago, Cook County, the state of Illinois, wherever you are in the country and the world, we do appreciate you. This is the largest Progressive Talk radio station in the entire world, the entire galaxy. I mean, I don't know what's happening in other hemispheres, but I do know, at least in this one, we're the best. And I do appreciate you all hanging out with us. The phone lines are still available to you all. No specific question, but if you just want to weigh in on some of our topics in our discussion today, by all means, feel free to do that. Again, my name is Brandon Johnson. At 8 o'clock, folks call me Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson. I have not officially clocked into that capacity just yet. So whatever I say or do, it won't be used against me when I do seek re-election. So those are the voters that I continue to lose because of my perspective of the world. Hopefully you won't hold that against me, especially those of you who have a particular fondness for orange Starburst. I just think that people who eat orange Starburst are weird. Why do you eat those? 773-763-9278. I'm really, really grateful to be joined by one of the more premier dynamic leaders, not just in the state of Illinois, but throughout the country. One of the longest serving elected officials, has served as an alderperson on the South Side in the 4th Ward, a committee woman, the chair of the Cook County Democratic Party. But the role that we are most familiar with for this young woman is the Cook County Board President of the Cook County Board of Commissioners, Tony Preckwinkle. Good morning, President Preckwinkle. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioner Johnson. Sometime you'll have to tell me what you got against orange Starburst.
Yeah, those it's the yellow ones too. I just find the taste to be just boring and just unuseful. Okay. That's all right.
All right. Good to know. Good to know.
All right. So I appreciate you getting up extra early this morning, though I know you've been up since 5:30 reading through all different types of documents and whatnot. But one of the things I do want to get your perspective of just quickly, as you know, the former Democratic Majority Leader Harry Reid passed away. I know you served in various capacities. I know you've been close with different leaders of the Democratic Party. Just any experiences with Senator Harry Reid that might be worth sharing?
Well, I can't speak from personal experience. I just know that he, was a longstanding leader in the Democratic Party, and we are grateful for his service. And he left the Senate recently, and probably because of concerns about his health. And we're sorry for his loss and grateful for his service.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so I guess we'll just get into it. There's a bunch of things that I would like to cover in the short period of time that we have, but this variant, variant, COVID-19, over the last couple of years, your leadership has certainly been, I believe, executed well. I mean, I know folks always can find critique in our work, but Cook County has made some recent decisions. I know you are briefed constantly from health and hospitals as well as the public health department based upon what we are seeing in Cook County. And I know this is an obvious question, but for folks who, I don't want people to take this for granted, what provoked the decision for Cook County government to take more drastic measures to help mitigate the spread of this virus?
Well, first of all, I want to say that, I'm grateful for the help and support of all of our commissioners as we've struggled to deal with the pandemic and the economic collapse. This is a once in a century situation. The last time we had a global pandemic of this magnitude was 1918. So I think we have to understand that this is an extraordinary moment, and we have to take extraordinary measures to deal with it. We've seen record cases of infection, on a daily basis for the last several weeks, and that's that's really concerning. The Delta variant is still with us. Omicron is apparently the predominant one at the moment, and a little bit milder for most people, but much more contagious. And as a result, the pool of people who are infected is considerable. And whenever that's the case, there'll be people who require hospitalization and who will succumb to the disease. And I want to remind people, we've lost more than 800,000 Americans in the last 2 years. 800,000. That's more people than we lost in the biggest catastrophe in our country's history of the Civil War, where we lost 600,000 people over the course of 4 years in the war. And in the last 2 years, we've lost 800,000 people. So we got to take this seriously, and our Department of Public Health has said that one of the ways in which we can mitigate the spread of the virus is to try to encourage people to be vaccinated and to wear masks. And so we've instituted, new guidelines for places where people tend to be unmasked, that is, in restaurants and bars and in fitness and entertainment venues. And we need people to be vaccinated, so we're asking the folks who own those establishments to be sure that people are vaccinated when they come in, and encourage them to wear masks when they're not eating, for example. We need people to be compliant if we're going to do anything about the impact of this virus on all of us, not just our health, but on our economy as well. I mean, if you look at what happened over the holiday season, all the flights were canceled. Why were they canceled? Because they didn't have staff. Why didn't they have staff? Because people were sick with COVID. I mean, the nightmare consequences of continuing to ignore the virus or not take seriously its consequences is going to be a challenge for us. So we took action, and it starts January 3rd. We're going to be sharing with those who own these establishments what the parameters are. January 3rd, proof of vaccination, indoor venues, most at risk for spreading COVID-19.
Have you found, at least in this, up to this point, when Cook County government instituted, these guidelines, did you find most folks to be compliant? And when I mean most folks, I should say most institutions. I know there's still a challenge with individuals, but what's been your experience as head of Cook County government as it relates to just the compliance and the cooperation? Compliance sounds a little too harsh, but the cooperation of institutions to help really just mitigate the harm.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would say the compliance isn't hard. Okay. Mandatory shutdowns would be harsh. And, I think it's in the interest of everybody who owns a bar or a restaurant or a fitness center or a movie theater to encourage people to take care of themselves, to protect themselves and each other, because we don't want to go back to a situation where we shut everything down because the virus is rampaging through our communities. So I think it's in the interest of people who own these establishments to try to ensure compliance so that there aren't more drastic measures that need to be taken to ensure public health. There's never going to be complete cooperation, but I'm encouraged by the cooperation we've seen in the past, and I hope for that continued level of cooperation going forward. But this is a moment where we all have to work together. If we don't take care of ourselves, we don't take care of each other, the virus just continues to, as I said, wreak havoc on our communities. Particularly, I would point out black and brown communities.
Yeah. Let's stay there for a second, because I've seen, the data, and I do appreciate the updates that we do get it as elected officials, and we try to disseminate that information throughout our communities. I saw some numbers as high as 75% of most Americans have received at least one dose. How are we doing in Cook County, particularly black and brown communities? I know we've had considerable amount of effort, and some would argue that we could and should do more. But how are we doing, particularly in communities that have been hardest hit by this pandemic, to get the vaccine into as many arms as possible?
Okay. Well, let me give the statistics for our communities as a whole, because unfortunately I don't have them broken down by race. 78% of suburban Cook County residents have been vaccinated at least once. Now, Cook County is responsible in terms of public health for most of suburban Cook County. The city of Chicago has its own Department of Public Health. and keeps its own records and statistics. 78% of suburban Cook County residents have gotten at least one shot. 60% have gotten 2 doses. A smaller percentage have gotten boosters. And, what we've seen is you are less likely to get sick at all or to only have a mild case of COVID if you have not just both shots, but your booster as well. So 3 shots. And I would encourage everyone, if you haven't gotten your second shot, please do so. If you haven't gotten your booster shot, please do so. They're available to everyone, all adults, and I think it's young people 5 and up. So we need to be sure that everybody is vaccinated, not just for yourself, but everybody you care about. Because even if you get a mild case of the disease, you might spread it to somebody in your family who's much more vulnerable and who won't have such a happy outcome. So we got to protect ourselves. We got to protect the people we love.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. No, it's spot on, and Madam President, thank you for that, because the effort to for those who, I don't want to bore folks with a sort of a lesson on Cook County government, but the jurisdiction that you have authority over, I mean, it's massive, but there are some limitations to that. And one of the things that I think is worth discussing a little bit, that as board president, there's responsibility, of course, suburban Cook County, particularly with its health department. But there are these separately elected office holders in Cook County, whether it's the treasurer, the assessor, the clerk of the circuit court, the clerk office, the state's attorney. How has it been in your capacity trying to get all of these, not just to get 17 Cook County commissioners on a page, but all of these separately elected office holders all pulling in the same direction, particularly as it relates to the critical investments that I believe that, you're pushing through the lens of equity, but also making sure that we are reforming and disrupting systems that have been harmful to many of our communities. How has that been? And how do you, and not only how has it been, how do we ensure that we all are pulling in the right direction as it relates to the critical investments that are needed in our communities, as well as it relates to making sure that we're disrupting systems that, quite frankly, that have been harmful and have been a failure as it relates to our communities?
Well, I think one of the first things we need to acknowledge is that government has been an actor in the oppression of people of color in this country, particularly of black folks. I mean, if you think about real estate, for example, for most families, your principal asset is your home, okay? And in this country, we allowed restrictive covenants that said, you could say that black people couldn't live in a community. It's right in the deed. It's in your property, a restrictive covenant. You can't sell to black people, okay? And the government, drew lines around communities of color and said these are places where you shouldn't invest. Said this to the banks, and we call that redlining. Right? So government has been an important contributor to the incredible inequities that we find in our communities today. Much of it based on race, and so government has a special obligation to repair the harm that's been done by our predecessors in government. And, one of the things we tried to do with the federal resources we got last year under the CARES Act, and we'll do this year under the American Rescue Plan Act, is try to address those inequities, just publicly and directly. So we spent a lot of money, our CARES Act resources, that's 2020, into economic development activities and technical assistance to small businesses. And we gave money to local government. We gave money to local government not just on the basis of population, but also on the basis of need. So it wasn't simply a per capita formula. It was based on the historic inequities that needed to be addressed with these federal resources. We provided support to women and people of color in many of our programs, and almost 2/3 of the applicants were women and people of color. So we're doing everything we can with the resources that we got last year and the resources that we got this year to try to address these historic inequities, as I said, much of it race-based. So just as government has been an agent in the past for inequity. We have to be an active agent now in addressing that inequity. So I'm grateful for the support we've gotten from our Board of Commissioners as we've done this work. We've been quite clear that's what we were going to do, and we got the support of our board, for which I'm grateful.
There's a state's attorney, there's a sheriff, there's a clerk of the circuit court, there's an assessor. I mean, you got a chief judge, you got health and hospitals. I mean, I can go on and on. I don't mean to stress you this early this morning, Madam President, but trying to get folks to move in a critical direction is. I know it's not easy. I mean, look, I'm in my third year serving, and obviously we've had our, I believe we've had multiple opportunities where we are able to sharpen one another, and challenge one another, But for folks who see county government, they don't necessarily see always the separately elected spaces. As you prepare for like what's next, for you politically, how do you find it? Working with individuals who will present a budget that does not necessarily match your ideological frame. And I'm only asking because this is something I'm struggling with too. I mean, there's no secret. I moved the budget for Black Lives. We called for the redirecting of dollars away from incarceration and policing. Do appreciate your leadership in terms of depopulating the jail. But Madam President, we have a long way to go. And there are instances in which the people that we work alongside, and sometimes even with each other, you and I, getting everybody on one page or one accord when folks are asking us to do more. How you gonna do that?
Well, listen. First of all, let me thank you for your advocacy and support. We are going to spend $285 million in the coming year on program initiatives. So that's almost $300 million. $100 million of it is going to go to economic and community growth, and in part because of your advocacy, $60 million is going to go to justice initiatives, which includes money for violence prevention. So we're spending a considerable part, about a little more than half of those resources, on economic development and on equity and justice initiatives. So, other money is going to be spent on health care. It's going to be spent on infrastructure, on environmental and sustainability projects. Okay, but half of the money is going to go to economic and community growth and addressing our criminal justice challenges and the challenges that violence presents in so many of our communities. Now, we've been working with the actors, the separately electeds, in public safety since 2013 to try to get everybody on the same page, rowing in the same direction to address the challenges we faced, particularly with incredibly high rates of detention and incarceration for Black people and for brown people to a lesser extent, but mostly for Black folks. And over that 8-year time period now, we've achieved a pretty remarkable consensus about the way in which we need to move forward. And I'm grateful to the chief judge, to the state's attorney, to the public defender, to the sheriff, and the clerk of the court for their collaboration and cooperation, because we couldn't do this work if everybody wasn't on the same page. So I'm grateful for that. And I guess I'd say what it takes is time and being willing to work with and listen to people who have different opinions on some issues, but just sticking with the notion that collaboration and cooperation are critical if you want to accomplish anything.
We have a couple more minutes here. I do want to talk about your desire and you're moving and seeking another term, but before I do that, the whole question around law enforcement and the role that it plays in our community, and obviously as a history teacher, this probably better than most. Myself as a social studies teacher, history teacher, but I'm going to ask you just a straight question here. Law enforcement, two parts. What role does law enforcement play, and do we need more of it? And I'm only asking, Madam President, because clearly, at least on the other side of the building, the mayor of Chicago is calling for more. What role does law enforcement play in terms of providing some security for our communities, and do we need more of it?
Well, I think when you look at the challenge that violence presents at this moment, you've got to have sort of immediate responses, mid-range responses, and long-term responses. And the medium and long-term responses have to be investments in communities that have been disinvested in marginalized oppressed, if you want to use that word, not just for decades, but for centuries, okay? Communities of color in this country have struggled with racism and its impacts since the get-go. Okay, so that's the mid and long term are investing in communities that are challenged and struggling. But the immediate issue is, how we're going to address the violence. And I think while we need a different kind of policing. First of all, I want to be clear. We can't live in a country in which there are no police. I'm sorry. As much as we would like it, unfortunately, there are bad actors in all of our communities, in all of our neighborhoods, and we have to address their bad actions. So we need a police force. But the second thing is we need a police force that is effective. And here's the challenge. In the city of Chicago, by their own admission, the police department closes, that is, comes to a conclusion about arresting somebody or kind of what happened. In a quarter of the cases, 25%, they arrest somebody for a murder. In 15% of the hijackings, they arrest somebody. And in 10% of the shootings, less than 10% of the shootings. Now that means if you commit a murder in the city of Chicago, you got 3 chances out of 4 of getting away with it. If you carjack somebody, you got 8 chances out of 10 of getting away with it. And if you shoot at somebody, you got 9 chances out of 10 of getting away with it. Now, the police department of the city of Chicago has to figure out how they're going to do better in terms of finding out who the criminals are and arresting them. I mean, the city is criticizing the county for electronic monitoring and letting people out and whatever. That's, in the first place, it's wrong and they know it. That's not the truth. That's not the challenge. The challenge is that the police aren't arresting people. If you don't arrest people, how on earth can we prosecute them? And furthermore, we have research from Loyola University, folks we've been working with for almost a decade, around what really happens with electronic monitoring. It's not the source of the violence we see on the street. So, first of all, the city's not honest about what the problems are, and secondly, they haven't taken the corrective action that they need to take to address the challenge, which is figure out how they're going to beef up their detective corps or whatever else they're going to do, so that they can really solve the problems, solve the crimes that have been committed. And unless people have confidence that crimes are going to be solved, you have people deciding that they're going to pursue vigilante justice, and people have no confidence in the police. So they've got some real challenges, and I hope they have a plan to address it, because I haven't seen it.
I do, and I appreciate that. And Madam President, we're going to run out of time here, but I'll give you just 30, 40 more seconds here. You're running for re-election. When you come back, if you promise to come back, let's have a deeper conversation about law enforcement and its role. And I think that'll be useful. Maybe we can do it even around a panel discussion. We won't put all of the pressure on you to figure it out, but I think challenging the notion of what policing looks like and how much police we need, and whether or not you can have a society with a different form of policing, I think is worthwhile discussion. But just 30 seconds or so, closing thoughts. You're running for re-election. What do you hope to focus on, and what do you hope to get out of another term?
Well, I, of course, want to continue the good work we've been doing in trying to provide quality health care for our residents and put the healthcare system on firm financial footing, continue with our criminal justice reform efforts. And, we've got, frankly, an historic opportunity, once-in-a-generation opportunity. We've got federal resources to spend on lifting up the people of Cook County and the communities in which they live. And so that's a tremendous challenge that I look forward to. $1 billion, 3 years to allocate it, 5 years to spend it. And we need to do that in the most responsible and equitable way that we possibly can. I look forward to that challenge.
It's Cook County Board President Tony Prankle. Will you come back when I get a chance to fill in again? Promise, right?
Not quite. Anytime you ask me.
All right. I appreciate it, you all. It's the Santita Jackson Show. My name is Brandon Johnson. In 30 minutes or so, I'll be a Cook County Commissioner. I'll clock in officially. And listen, we're not done with Cook County government. Sharon Mitchell, the public defender, is going to come on. We're going to continue this conversation, you all. It is the Santita Jackson Show, 8:20 a.m. Progressive Talk Radio. Good morning, y'all.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT Willow Springs is powered by ComEd. Lower your energy bills and reduce your carbon footprint with the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program.
'Tis the season for savings at Huck Volkswagen of Joliet during the Volkswagen Sign Then Drive event. Choose from a huge selection of new Volkswagen models like Jetta, Tiguan, Taos, Atlas, and Atlas Cross Sport, and pay nothing out of pocket. Just sign, then drive. Or take advantage of 0% financing for 72 months on new Volkswagen models. 'Tis the season, and no one in the Chicagoland area sells more new Volkswagen models than Hawk Volkswagen of Joliet. Combine that with outstanding customer service, and it's easy to see why we have been the #1 volume Volkswagen dealership in Illinois for the last 5 years in a row. Hawk Volkswagen on Jefferson Street in Joliet. Online at hawkvw.com. Available on select new Volkswagen models with approved credit plus tax, title, license, doc fee, plus finance through Volkswagen Credit. See dealer for details. #1 claim based on 2016 through 2020 retail sales. Expires 1/3/22.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Here's the latest Chicago traffic update.
On the south side, 26th Street remains closed between Union and Canal for a structure fire to 2-alarm fire. They also have Normal and Wallace closed in that surrounding area. Also this morning, on the outbound Kennedy, it's a little sluggish from the Byrne interchange to Washington, while the inbound Eisenhower at Harlem, there's a report of a stall. It takes out the right lane. Outbound Ike at Mannheim, a crash is in the right lane. Stevenson inbound as you approach the Dan Ryan. That ramp from the inbound Stevenson to the inbound Dan Ryan is hitting the brakes. And the Dan Ryan heading inbound, right now it's a little sluggish from 18th into the Byrne interchange. Also on the Bishop Ford inbound at 159th, there's a report of a crash this morning. That's traffic. I'm Paul Bodenloss.
Susan, I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic is terrible.
It sure is. But on top of that, gas prices have been skyrocketing. I can't believe how expensive gas has gotten recently.
Prices at the pump are up, but I never pay full price for gas anymore. I just use the free Get Upside Gas app that pays you cash back for every gallon of gas you buy.
Wait a minute. Are you saying you actually get paid cash when you buy gas with the Get Upside app?
Yes, up to 25 cents a gallon cash back every time I buy gas.
And does that actually add up to anything?
Some months I make $200 to $300.
Wow, that's serious extra cash. I'm downloading the free Get Upside app now.
Download the free Get Upside app now in the App Store or Google Play to save up to 25 cents a gallon when you buy gas. Use promo code TOUR for a 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's up to 50 cents a gallon on your first fill-up. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUR for up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUR.
Velvety paper feel, exquisite colors, stunning scale. At Staples, we sweat the details and quality of every print project. Stop by Staples and try our Print Big Promise. We're committed to getting your print job right, to treating your small business like a big deal, and guiding you from start to finish. Get 20% off signs, banners, and posters when you spend $75 or more. Offer ends January 1st. Visit staples.com/services/printing for details. Staples, where small business prints big.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
And welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Good morning, you all. It is already 7:30 something. You all, you've been hanging out with me for the last hour and a half. If you're just waking up and you're tuning in for the first time this morning, yes, it's Brandon Johnson. I'm back again, filling in for Santita Jackson, the great Santita Jackson, giving her, of course, a much-needed time off. I do appreciate you all hanging out with us these last couple of days. Day 3, a little bit easier waking up, once you get through the first couple of days, and I've enjoyed it immensely. The phone lines are available to you if you just want to weigh in on any of the topics that we've discussed thus far, or just offer a perspective around our first guest. You can do that, 773-763-9278. If you just want to continue to listen, you can do that as well. I appreciate you, because our next guest, we are on a roll today, is one of the more dynamic premier leaders, I believe, in Cook County government. Has an incredible background as an organizer, as a lead thinker around reforming our criminal system, and as now recently, or at least over the last year, a little bit less than a year, he is the public defender of Cook County, Sharon Mitchell. Good morning, brother Sharon. How you doing, man?
How you doing, brother? Thank you so much for having me.
Now, we appreciate you being here, and I know taking some time during the holiday break. I am especially appreciative of that. And so, we've had a couple of dynamic folks before you, and we don't expect anything less from you. But we had the board president, Tony Preckwinkle, on the last 30 minutes an hour ago. A young voice, Julian High School freshman, Caitlin Savato, and both conversations really led into, I think, what our topic, will be for this moment, is really unpacking how we deal with public safety and what's really going on out there. And as public defender, I know you see quite a bit, but for those who may not be familiar, the role of Cook County Public Defender, even the process, just take a minute or so just to outline the process of how you became the public defender and what is your role as lead public defender, and what responsibilities do public defenders that obviously work alongside of you, the role that they have? Can you do that in 90 seconds, Brother Mitchell?
I'm gonna give it a try. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, somebody who's been committed to public service, and grew up in Moran Park, raised, lived in Moran Park now, but raised in West Bowman. And always saw the justice system as a place in which our folks, were harmed. Went to law school, became a public defender, had, an incredibly challenging job in defending the rights of folks who find themselves in the justice system. Left the office, went to go work advocating for more structural reforms, and I've come back now in the last 9 months to help lead the office I started with. And public defenders generally, we represent folks who do not have the financial means within themselves in the justice system. So that means folks who are charged with criminal offenses, people who are charged with traffic offenses, people who are charged with children who are charged with juvenile offenses. If they cannot afford a lawyer, they are afforded an attorney from our office. So we are about 650 strong. 420 of those folks are lawyers, but we also have investigators, caseworkers, support staff, other specialists that allow for our law firm to help fight for the rights of people who find themselves in the legal system.
I'm glad you mentioned your background too, and thank you for summing that up quickly. You did well, but you often tell a story about just a classmate, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, just that brought some perspective around your pursuit for justice. Do you mind sharing that, Sharon? Because I think it's instructive for people just get an understanding of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said before, I grew up in West Pullman, went to Metcalf Community Academy. Was blessed to have a great public school experience, and then went to Moran Park High School, went to college at Illinois, and decided that I wanted to intern at the public defender's office, and I knew I wanted to get in this work. I suspected that I wanted to be a public defender, but within this internship program as a law student, just to really kind of confirm what I thought I wanted to do. And I was working for an attorney, and my job as an intern was to go in the back of the courtroom and talk to the men that were awaiting their case to be called. And one of the first days, I got there, I got in the back, and as soon as I got back there, I locked eyes with a young man I knew in second grade. And we had an incredibly long conversation. And what I remember from that conversation is that I couldn't believe that he was in that khaki suit, knowing his character, knowing who he was, and he couldn't believe that I was on the other side of those bars in another type of suit. And that wonderment, that conversation, I think, locked in for me. I think often we think that people who find themselves in the legal system in the wrong side of law are bad people, and there are bad people and there are good people. And the justice system goal is to lock up the bad people for the good people. And quite frankly, I don't have the prerequisite pigment, nor do I have the prerequisite lack of experience to believe in that fallacy. So I am here and not only me, but 650 folks are here to fight against that and to really do what we can to ensure that people have fair access to justice. And it's a constant struggle. We don't always get it right, but we do the best that we can for the folks that we represent.
We're talking to Sharon Mitchell. He's the Cook County Public Defender, and here in Cook County. And just, I think it's an important note that Cook County government provides legal representation for families and individuals who cannot afford it. And I'm glad that you highlighted, the assumptions that people make about folks who rely upon the public to defend them, because there's an assumption that people who have public defenders are inherently evil or guilty. And in most cases, unfortunately, there is a degree of pleading that probably helps exacerbate that assumption. But one of the things, though, I think it's important that we just unpack with the limited time that we do have is the mayor of Chicago gave quite a speech a couple of weeks ago, and I'll try to sum it up to the best of my ability, because I believe your response, or at least what was recorded as your response, I think was why I wanted to have a conversation with you today. And basically the mayor of Chicago said, look, there's violence in the city of Chicago. Everybody knows that's getting bad. And the premise of her speech, Brother Mitchell, was three things. One, Cook County government is responsible for the uptick in violence. Two, the federal government is not doing enough. And then three, poverty is an issue, but I'm addressing that. But one of the things, I'll just cut to it, you characterize her speech as a speech that ultimately is promulgating fear. And that's not even deal with the constitutionality of it. But for you to make that statement, what did you hear in her speech and her presentation that allowed you to come to the conclusion that her presentation is provocated by fear? And then finally, what impact does that presentation have on the work that you are doing and leading in your effort to reform this broken system?
I think that the mayor actually did a solid job of diagnosing the real root causes of violence, right? She talked early in the speech, I think, pretty dynamically about how we got to the situation. But our, I think, issues came with many of the solutions that were proposed. I think were just, at best, completely ineffective. At worst, things that would exacerbate the issues that find us here today. I think two of the things that we took as, I think, we had extreme issue with is this idea, this continued perpetuation of this idea that folks on electronic monitoring are responsible for the violence in the city, and also this idea that this proposal to sue gangs will somehow provide some modicum of safety for our community. I think too often, reformers, abolitionists, people who look for the system to be changed, get kind of painted with this brush that we don't believe that there's harm in the city. There's incredible harm in the city. There is incredible loss in the city. But the reality of the situation is that the status quo has provided the circumstances which allows this harm to continue. And folks who want to change the situation are saying what has happened in the past has not worked. And what you heard in the speech was a doubling down on these past failed techniques, these past failed strategies. I think there are things that the mayor has done that's been great. The investment in housing has been great. The investment in a public safety institution that looks outside of just policing has been great. But some of these very particular proposals, again, are just out and out, maybe it's politically savvy, maybe it's politically viable, but they just won't help communities. Communities are the ones that I've done.
So unpack the electronic monitoring part. When is it used, and why do we use electronic monitoring? The president was on before you, and she had some analysis and critique around it, and she basically flat out called it false, the characterization. But for those of folks who may not be familiar with just the electronic monitoring structure, what is it, when is it used, and why?
Yeah, so it's used in a variety of ways. When a person is accused of an offense, they go before a judge, and the judge has to make a determination about what's going to happen to the person while the case runs. And one of the options, and kind of hard to kind of put into a neat little box, is what can happen is that a person can end up on electronic monitoring. That person can be ordered on electronic monitoring kind of just straight out. That person can be given electronic monitoring after they post the bond. But what the result is that we have kind of the largest electronic monitoring system in the country. And there has been this tendency to kind of insinuate that the folks, the harm in our community, right, the murders that are happening from people who are on electronic monitoring. And even in the speech that we heard from Mayor Lightfoot, we heard some kind of really, we heard some numbers that weren't particularly true when it comes to electronic monitoring. The reality of the situation is the vast majority of people who are on electronic monitoring in Cook County are successful at the program. They show up at their court appearances. They don't violate the pretrial terms of their release. They are not rearrested. Well, the reality of the situation is because there are so many people on electronic monitoring, judges don't have crystal balls, and it's not. And it does happen from time to time where a person who's on electronic monitoring is accused of another offense. Now, one with a sidebar, but I can't help but to say is that throughout this entire conversation, we basically, as a community, or as people continue to say that, like, tend to act like if you're accused of offense, then you are guilty of this. And I would argue that the history of this region suggests that mere arrest or mere rearrest does not mean that somebody's guilty. And quite frankly, every single day, the public defender's office works with our clients to prove people's innocence. But this idea that somebody's on electronic monitoring and they're responsible for the violence in the city is just untrue. The numbers are there. It's clear. These people are on GPS tracking. And while you do have a few instances, the fact of the matter is the vast majority of people are not responsible for their harm.
You mentioned just the history of Cook County, especially as, we the month of December, Brother Sharon, you aware of this, we commemorate and we think a lot about our dear brother, Fred Hampton, and the Black Panther Party, and just the role that Cook County, had in the literal assassination of a movement, and then how the history continued, where many black men in particular were beat and terrorized and tortured into these false confessions, and the fact that the state's attorney is working to actually exonerate individuals who have been wrongfully accused and incarcerated is why it's actually quite disturbing to create a scenario in which people are automatically assuming that electronic monitoring or being brought before a judge automatically makes you guilty. And so that's what leads me into my next question about the constitutionality around some of the things that she proposed. While I was listening to the speech, Sharon, I was struck because I grew up in the era of the 90s. So I was a kid, but old enough to know what the 90s meant in terms of the whole three strikes and like the explosion of the incarceration, the carceral state that we are experiencing right now. It was a throwback as far as I was concerned. And she literally said in her speech, "This is not the 90s," even though the 90s was all up and through it. But even the constitutionality around her presentation, can you unpack that a little bit? I mean, especially the notion of even suing gang members. I don't want to be facetious here because I think she takes herself seriously. Whether I think her ideas are worthwhile or not, but the ability, the constitutionality around her proposals and the ability to sue a gang member, help me understand the rationale of that, if you can.
Yeah, so let's talk about these kind of two separate proposals. When Stephanie Coleman from Northwestern wrote a very, I think, this excellent opinion piece on this. There's this idea that when somebody is accused of a certain type of offense, the mayor has proposed that that person essentially be detained because of what they are charged with. And this idea that you make a decision about what happens to a person based specifically on the allegation is like almost a definition of unconstitutionality, right? We need to have, and it makes sense given our recent history, we need to have an examination about whether that person should be held, and we need to have a hearing in which that decision is made. Because as we talked about before, the folks are innocent until proven guilty, and that's just not a kind of a dusty legal precedent. That exists because our system gets it wrong all the time, right? The fact that you are arrested for an offense does not mean that you are guilty for offense. I love to cite the numbers of the death penalty, right? These are people who were charged with the most serious offenses, and when we had stopped the death penalty, we had exonerated just as many people as we've executed, right? So there's this idea, so you talked about it with Fred Hampton, we know that the system in making allegations is wrong all the time. So this idea that we should just start the punishment because of an allegation, it makes the little policy sense, but it's also deeply unconstitutional. And this idea is born of this idea that people who are accused of offenses are the people that are driving the offenses. And the mayor even went so far to cite a number of 2,300 people who are on electronic monitoring accused of violent crimes have been arrested for other crimes. That number is actually inaccurate. It's about half of that number. She included numbers of nonviolent offenses as well. The second point, this idea that we can sue gang members and somehow that will shut down gangs is problematic for just a number of reasons. I think you identified one of the first ones, this idea that you can kind of find a gang member who was violent and you haven't used the legal system to detain them. That's the one thing, but that you can find them and sue them, drag them in court. Again, I think that the mayor is a very serious, very intelligent woman, but this particular proposal just doesn't get there. It's civil asset forfeiture. It's something that we've seen across the country, and what happens is, instead of actually suing quote-unquote gang kingpins, the people that get caught up in this is grandmothers and great aunts and mothers and fathers. What happens is if you are in a car and you are accused of gang activity, they take the car. And the car ain't yours, it's your grandmother's. If you are in a house and accused of gang activity, they take the house. That's taking money out of the community and converting it to the state. It is something that jurisdictions that are much more successful than us when it comes to violence prevention have turned away from. It's a process that was so fraught with failure that the Republican governor of our state, Bruce Rauner, signed a bill in 2017 significantly limiting the ability for us to conduct civil asset forfeiture. So you aren't lying when you say that this was a real throwback to the 80s and 90s where we really failed at treating people or treating communities with the respect they needed to heal themselves. And we were really ineffective at solving the issues that we see today.
Sharon, I've been reading Locking Up Our Own. I'm reading it again. It's the second time. Just kind of skimming through it. And, it was, black political leadership at the time when crime had reached, levels like we're experiencing now where folks begin to panic and they begin to live and walk in fear. And look, I'll be honest with you, and I know we've had these conversations before, brother, that, living in Chicago, I'm raised in a black family in Austin. Austin has been declared as one of the most toughest, violent communities in the entire city of Chicago. And it does cross my mind, when I'm out and about, My head is on a swivel, as they say. You're paying attention to all the details. You don't just sit in your car. All the things, unfortunately, that we do to try to prevent ourselves from being, overly vulnerable. But even with that, and I know there's some psychology there that we probably should work through. But this notion of more law enforcement, this notion of locking up more folks, like that is an age-old, tried, failed structure that, again, only promulgates more fear. And so my direct question to you is like this notion of more law enforcement, because she calls for that as well. With the work that you do, and the work that you do is intimately tied to law enforcement, right? What role does law enforcement play, and do we need more of it? And when I say law enforcement, let me be specific: policing. And that's everything from federal agents to beat cops.
Yeah, let me be clear. I hope I don't go too long on this. I do have a few thoughts on this.
And we got to do it in 2 minutes, Brother Sharon, by the way. I'm running out of time.
It's harm exists, right? So that natural reaction that you have to ensure that you are safe and your family is safe and your community is safe is not unnatural. I think what we need to realize is that our putting our eggs in the law enforcement basket has failed. We spend about 95% of our region's public safety law enforcement dollars on interventions that exist after harm has happened, after there's been an accusation, and we spend about 5% of our money on prevention of said harm. There is a unique structural limitation to putting the justice system on a pedestal and putting it as our lead response to harm and violence. You heard the president talk about the numbers, right? Around, 20, less 25%, 10%, 20% of people accused of a certain power of accusations leading to arrest. I don't think that it's just our law enforcement is bad. I just think that there is a fundamental failure of that system to be able to deliver the safety that our communities need. So I think you did a great job with the budget for Black Lives. We need to be putting our eggs in the basket of things that can actually make our communities safer, as opposed to putting our eggs in our basket of things that make us feel safer, but we continue to see the failures over and over and over and over again of spending billions and billions of dollars on things that only respond to harm but don't actually prevent it.
That's Sharon Mitchell. Man, we got to do this again. Promise you got to come back, okay?
Listen, I'm ready, buddy. I'm gonna have my orange fibers.
Right. I don't know why I started that, but here's the thing too. Before we run out of here too, I don't think you get enough credit, brother. Before you were a public defender, just one of the key architects and just a thought partner in moving budgets that reflect our values and moving policies that could help flip upside down these failed systems that have terrorized our communities for far too long. And so, brother, I do appreciate your leadership. That is the Cook County Public Defender, Sharon Mitchell. I appreciate you all hanging out with us. He promised to come back, you all. I can't believe the time has gotten away from us. I do want to thank, of course, our producer again, Devin. 2 days this week, coming back for a third day. And so tomorrow, you all check it out. Tomorrow's show is going to be awesome. Going to have Tara Stamps back in studio with us, so that'll be a blast. Check it out. We got the vice president of the Chicago Teachers Union and Illinois Federation of Teachers, Stacey Davis Gates, will be on with us. Pastor Will Hall will be on with us. State Representative Cam Buckner. Y'all, look, tomorrow's show is going to be lit, so promise to come hang out with us. Thank you all again. This is the Santita Jackson Show, Progressive Talk Radio, 820 AM, where the facts matter. My name is Brandon Johnson. In 10 minutes, I'll be a Cook County Commissioner. God bless you all. Love you. Do your very best to stay warm and safe, and stop coming after me in your cars. It's just snow, y'all. Love you. See you tomorrow. Peace.
Have you wanted to speak a new language but thought it'd be too difficult or take too much time? Then try Babbel. Whether you want to learn Spanish for future travel plans, French to connect with extended family, or maybe German to land a new job, Babbel works because it's built around real life. It teaches you everyday practical conversations that you'll actually use. All you need is 15 minutes a day, and you'll be on your way to confidently speaking a new language in just a few weeks. Babbel is designed by real language experts using a modern, conversation-based technique that makes learning fun, engaging, and best of all, memorable. It starts by teaching you words and phrases. Then sentences gradually get more complex